Integration begins when the lesson is no longer asking to be understood as an idea, but lived as a normal part of who you are. It is the phase where the cycle stops trying to impress you and starts trying to settle into your body, your choices, your patterns, and your daily way of moving. This is why integration often feels quieter than people expect. After emergence, growth, bloom, and descent, the mind may look for a dramatic arrival, but integration rarely announces itself with intensity. It appears as the simple fact that something you once had to reach for is now beginning to feel natural. The purpose of integration is not to keep the high alive. It is to make the truth usable. A person can have a powerful realization and still live exactly the same way afterward if that realization never becomes behavior. They can understand their patterns, name their wounds, explain their cycles, and still repeat them when pressure returns. Integration is what closes that gap. It turns insight into instinct, awareness into response, and interchange into lived evidence. This is the mechanism most people miss. Understanding happens in the mind first, but integration happens through repetition across real conditions. You do not know if a lesson has integrated just because it felt true during a quiet moment. You know it is integrating when it remains available during frustration, disappointment, uncertainty, fatigue, and ordinary life. The lesson has to survive contact with the world. Until then, it is still a beautiful recognition waiting to become a stable part of you. You may notice integration through small changes that do not feel dramatic at first. You pause before reacting where you once would have defended yourself. You choose rest without needing to justify it. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You make a decision from clarity instead of from pressure. None of these may feel like a major breakthrough in the moment, but they are the evidence of a deeper shift. Integration often reveals itself not through what you feel, but through what you no longer automatically do. That is why integration can feel ordinary and profound at the same time. The mind wants transformation to feel extraordinary because extraordinary feeling proves something happened. But the body knows transformation is real when it becomes ordinary enough to repeat. A new boundary is not integrated when you announce it once. It is integrated when you honor it on a tired day, when someone pushes against it, when guilt tries to negotiate with it, when the old self tries to return through habit. Integration is the process of becoming trustworthy to your own truth. This changes your perspective on progress. Earlier in the cycle, progress may have looked like movement, expansion, visibility, or emotional intensity. In integration, progress often looks like consistency. It looks like fewer dramatic swings. It looks like less need to prove that you have changed. It looks like calm decisions that would have once required a crisis. If you only measure progress by excitement, you will overlook the most important evidence of your becoming. Integration also changes how you relate to the past. The earlier phases may have revealed what you were leaving behind, but integration helps you carry the wisdom without staying emotionally tangled in the old identity. You stop needing to reject who you were in order to become who you are. That matters because rejection keeps you tied to the thing you are trying to outgrow. Integration allows a cleaner relationship. You can say, that version of me served a purpose, learned within limits, protected me in the ways it knew, and now I am living from a wider place. This is not sentimental, it is practical. When you hate an old version of yourself, you often recreate it under stress because part of you still feels unresolved toward it. When you integrate, you reclaim the energy that was trapped in self-rejection. You stop using shame as proof of growth. You stop needing to punish yourself for what you did not know. This frees up attention for the present, where the new pattern actually has to be lived. The experience of integration can also feel slower because it asks you to trust what has already changed. During growth, you are reaching. During bloom, you are expressing. During descent, you are sorting. During integration, you are allowing the system to catch up. This means you may feel less urgency, less intensity, and less need to chase a new revelation. That can feel strange if you are used to equating depth with constant discovery. But integration teaches that wisdom does not always come from finding more. Sometimes wisdom comes from finally living what you already know. This is where intelligent repetition becomes important. You return to the same truth, but each time it meets a different part of your life. A truth about boundaries first appears in a conversation, then in your schedule, then in your body, then in your relationship with work, then in your relationship with yourself. Each return makes the truth less abstract. It becomes less like something you believe and more like something your life is being organized around. That is how integration deepens without needing constant novelty. There is a quiet humility in this phase because integration exposes the difference between realization and readiness. You may realize something quickly, but readiness to live it may take longer. That does not mean the realization was false. It means your whole system has to reorganize around it. Habits, emotional reflexes, relational patterns, self-image, and nervous system expectations all need time to adjust. Integration respects that adjustment instead of demanding instant perfection. This is why people often repeat old patterns during integration and think they have failed. They react once in an old way and assume nothing changed. But integration is not proving by never stumbling. It is proven by how quickly awareness returns, how honestly you repair, and how differently you choose the next time. The old pattern may still appear, but it no longer owns the room in the same way. You see it sooner. You recover faster. You learn without collapsing into shame. That is progress with roots. The implication is important for anyone walking through this phase. You do not need to keep forcing evidence of transformation. You need to create conditions where the new truth can become repeatable. That may mean simplifying your environment, reducing unnecessary pressure, practicing one boundary until it becomes stable, or giving yourself time before taking on the next major expansion. Integration is not a delay. It is the part of the cycle that makes the next expansion safer, cleaner, and more honest. When integration is ignored, the next cycle begins on an unstable foundation. A person may keep seeking new insights because the last insight never became embodied. They consume more teachings, chase more signs, pursue more breakthroughs, but their daily life remains organized around the same old patterns. This creates spiritual congestion. Too much awareness enters the system without enough lived change to hold it. Integration prevents that congestion by slowing the hunger for more and turning attention toward what must now be practiced. You can feel integration working when your relationship with truth becomes less dramatic and more dependable. You do not need to announce every shift. You do not need to explain every boundary. You do not need to convince yourself that you are changing. You simply notice that certain choices now feel impossible to betray without feeling the cost immediately. That is a sign that truth has moved deeper than thought. It has entered your inner structure. This is also why integration can bring a sense of peace that is different from relief. Relief comes when pressure leaves. Peace comes when something inside you stops arguing with what you already know. It is quieter than excitement, but stronger in the long run. It does not make every situation easy, but it makes your own center more accessible inside the situation. That kind of peace is not passive. It is the result of alignment becoming familiar. As this phase deepens, you begin to see that integration is not the end of the spiral life cycle, but the place where the cycle becomes part of you. What emerged as a signal, grew as a structure, bloomed as expression, and descended as truth now becomes a lived capacity. The movement has traveled through your life and returned to your center with something changed. You are not simply back where you started. You are standing in the same world with a different internal arrangement. And once that internal arrangement becomes stable enough, Another quiet beginning starts forming beneath the surface, not as urgency, not as crisis, not as the need to escape what is here, but as the natural stirring that comes when a completed lesson creates space for the next layer of becoming to reveal itself. That new stirring is easy to misunderstand because it does not always feel like excitement at first. It may feel like spaciousness, like room opening inside your life where pressure used to live. It may feel like a quiet readiness that has no need to rush itself into a plan. This is one of the clearest signs that integration is doing its work. The system is not trying to escape the present cycle anymore. It is beginning to move because something inside has become settled enough to allow another movement. When integration is immature, the next movement comes from impatience. You want the next revelation because stillness feels boring. You want the next expansion because the current version of life feels too ordinary. You want another breakthrough because without one, you fear you are not evolving. But when integration is real, the next movement comes from fullness rather than lack. You are not trying to flee the phase you are in. You are sensing that the phase has given what it came to give. This difference matters because it changes the quality of the next cycle before it begins. A cycle that starts from lack often recreates the same lessons in a louder form. A cycle that starts from integration carries forward the wisdom of the last one. The outer movement may look similar from the outside, but the inner architecture is different. You do not move because you cannot stand where you are. You move because where you stand has become stable enough to support a new direction. This is why integration is deeply connected to trust. Not the dramatic kind of trust that says everything will work out exactly the way you want, but the quieter trust that says you can remain present long enough to understand what is forming. You are no longer forcing timing to calm anxiety. You are no longer demanding clarity to avoid discomfort. You are allowing recognition to grow at its own pace. That patience is not weakness. It is evidence that the cycle has matured you. You may notice this in the way your decisions begin changing. Earlier versions of you may have chosen quickly just to relieve tension. Now you can let a decision ripen without calling that hesitation. You can hold several possibilities without needing to collapse them too soon. You can feel when an option is not wrong, but also not fully alive. Integration gives you the ability to sense the difference between a choice that is available and a choice that is aligned. That ability has real consequences. It keeps you from repeating old cycles simply because they are familiar. It keeps you from mistaking opportunity for calling. It keeps you from saying yes because the door opened. Not every open door belongs to the next cycle. Some doors appear to test whether you have integrated the lesson of discernment. If you have, you do not need to reject the door dramatically. You simply know that access is not the same as assignment. This is one of the deeper practical gifts of integration. It teaches you to respond without overreacting. You do not have to make every feeling into a message, every coincidence into a command, every difficulty into a sign, or every quiet season into a crisis. You become more measured because your inner world is not demanding constant proof. That steadiness does not make life less meaningful. It makes meaning easier to hear without distortion. From the perspective of experience, this can look like a person becoming less reactive and more exact. They still feel deeply, but they are not governed as easily by every wave. They still care, but their care is no longer shaped by panic. They still want growth, but growth is no longer a way to escape themselves. This is the kind of change people may not notice immediately, because it does not always announce itself. It shows up in what no longer controls you. That phrase is important. Integration is often proven by what no longer controls you. The old fear may still speak, but it does not steer. The old desire may still appear, but it does not command. The old wound may still ache, but it does not decide your future on your behalf. This is not emotional numbness, it is inner order. The parts of you that once took over are now being held inside a wider awareness. This wider awareness changes your relationship with identity. Instead of building a personality around every lesson, you begin letting lessons become part of your depth without needing to turn them into performance. You do not need to constantly talk about how healed you are, how awake you are, how different you are, or how much you have changed. You live it quietly enough that it becomes obvious without announcement. That is not hiding, it is maturity. There is a strong implication here for spiritual and personal development. A person who cannot integrate will always need the next experience to confirm their path. They will keep searching for intensity, because intensity temporarily gives them identity. But a person who integrates becomes less dependent on intensity because identity has moved deeper than experience. They can have a quiet month and still know they are evolving. They can have an ordinary day and still remain connected to the truth that shaped them. This is why ordinary life is such an important testing ground. It is easy to feel changed in a powerful moment. It is harder to be changed while answering messages, washing dishes, going to work, having uncomfortable conversations, managing fatigue, or making simple choices that no one praises. Integration brings the sacred into the ordinary by refusing to keep truth separate from daily life. It asks whether the insight can live in your schedule, your tone of voice, your boundaries, your spending, your attention, and your rest. Once you see this, you stop looking down on ordinary days. They become the place where the cycle proves itself. Not every day is meant to open a portal of revelation. Some days exist to show you whether the revelation has become stable. You learn to respect repetition because repetition gives truth a body. You learn to respect small choices because small choices are where identity becomes real. The returning idea now deepens again. Integration turns insight into instinct, but it does so by meeting life repeatedly. That means the phase cannot be rushed by thinking harder. You cannot mentally force embodiment. You live your way into it. Each moment gives the lesson a place to land. Each honest repetition makes it more available next time. This is why integration feels slower than understanding. It is not moving at the speed of thought. It is moving at the speed of becoming. And because it moves at that speed, it teaches compassion for your own process. You stop expecting every part of you to update at once. You stop calling yourself fake because an old pattern still has residue. You stop treating growth like a courtroom where one mistake proves the whole transformation false. You begin seeing change as layered, and this layered view creates patience without making excuses. You can be honest about where you are and still remain committed to where you are going. That balance is one of the signs of real integration. You do not deny what still needs work, but you also do not erase what has genuinely changed. You stop using humility as self-dismissal. You stop using confidence as avoidance. You learn to hold both truth and unfinishedness in the same breath. This allows your development to become honest instead of dramatic. As this honesty deepens, the next cycle begins forming with less chaos. Emergence does not need to arrive as crisis because you have become more sensitive to subtle signals. Growth does not have to feel as frantic because your structure is less fragile. Bloom does not have to intoxicate you as strongly because you are less hungry for proof. Dissent does not have to terrify you because you know quietness is not failure. Integration changes every future phase by changing the one who enters them. This is why integration is not a soft ending. It is a quiet restructuring of your relationship to the entire spiral. The lesson becomes part of how you see, not just something you saw once. The truth becomes part of how you choose, not just something you agreed with once. The change becomes part of how you live, not just something you felt in a heightened moment. And when that happens, the next movement does not have to convince you of anything. It only has to reveal where the newly integrated self is now ready to go. The newly integrated self does not always need a dramatic sign before it moves again. Sometimes it simply notices that certain choices are now easier to make cleanly. What used to require a long inner negotiation becomes simple. What used to pull you into old conflict now passes through without taking over. This is one of the quietest forms of progress because it does not feel like conquest. It feels like the absence of an old argument. That absence matters more than people realize. Many changes are not measured by what appears, but by what no longer has power. The impulse to explain yourself may weaken. The need to be understood by everyone may soften. The old habit of shrinking before certain people may stop feeling available. These are not empty spaces. They are places where energy has returned to you. When energy returns, life begins reorganizing around a calmer center. You may still have responsibilities, pressure, uncertainty, and emotion, but they do not scatter you in the same way. The system has learned a new arrangement. Integration means your inner life has become less vulnerable to being hijacked by every outer movement. This does not make you invulnerable. It makes you more recoverable. Recoverability is one of the strongest signs of real integration. You may still get triggered, but you come back faster. You may still doubt, but doubt does not become a full identity. You may still feel fear, but fear does not automatically decide for you. This is where the lesson becomes functional. It does not prevent every disturbance. It gives you a clearer way home after disturbance happens. This is why integration should not be judged by whether life becomes perfect. It should be judged by whether your relationship to life becomes more honest and less reactive. A person can still have hard days and be deeply integrated. A person can still feel sadness, fatigue, confusion, or resistance and be more whole than they were before. Wholeness is not a constant pleasant state. Wholeness is the ability to remain in relationship with yourself through changing states. This becomes important when the next cycle begins to whisper. If you expect integration to feel like permanent peace, you may resist the first signs of new movement. You may think the return of uncertainty means integration failed, but uncertainty can return from a higher place. It can come not as confusion from fragmentation, but as the natural opening of a new layer. The difference is felt in the center. One kind of uncertainty scatters you, another kind invites you forward. This is where integration becomes a bridge. It does not trap you in stability. It prepares stability to move. The lesson settles so that the next question can rise. The self becomes more coherent so that a wider pattern can be entered without the same collapse. A completed cycle does not end your becoming. It gives your becoming a stronger vessel. You can see this in ordinary life when someone stops chasing transformation but still keeps changing. They are not forcing a new identity every few months. They are not constantly announcing another breakthrough. Yet their choices become cleaner, their presence becomes steadier, and their relationships with old patterns become less entangled. They may appear quieter from the outside, but internally they are becoming more available to truth. That is integration expressing itself without performance. The practical implication is that you must protect this phase from unnecessary speed. Just because you feel better does not mean the next expansion should be forced immediately. The old world often pressures people to turn every improvement into productivity. If you heal, produce. If you stabilize, expand. If you find peace, monetize it, explain it, display it, prove it. Integration asks for something wiser than immediate output. It asks you to let the new foundation become strong enough that future movement does not crack it. This is also why rest changes meaning during integration. Rest is no longer just recovery from exhaustion. It becomes a space where the new self settles deeper into the body. In rest, you notice what no longer pulls you. You notice what feels simpler. You notice what still needs support. Rest becomes part of embodiment, not an interruption of progress. The same is true of repetition. A repeated choice may look boring from the outside, but inside it may be building a new identity. Choosing peace once is meaningful. Choosing it repeatedly when conflict offers you an old kind of power is integration. Choosing honesty once is powerful. Choosing it repeatedly when performance would earn approval is integration. The repetition is not dull. It is the way truth learns to live through you. As this continues, you begin to develop a different kind of confidence. It is not loud, and it does not need constant reinforcement. It comes from seeing yourself keep returning to alignment even when conditions shift. You become confident not because you believe nothing can shake you, but because you have watched yourself come back after being shaken. That kind of confidence is sober. It has roots in lived experience rather than imagination. This rooted confidence changes how you enter the next cycle. Emergence becomes less frightening because you have learned that certainty is not always danger. Growth becomes less frantic because you have learned that momentum needs structure. Bloom becomes less intoxicating because you have learned that radiance is not final identity. Dissent becomes less humiliating because you have learned that quietness can be deeply intelligent. Integration changes the meaning of every phase because you are no longer meeting them from the same level of awareness. That is the deeper implication of the whole process. The spiral does not simply move you through phases, it changes the one who moves through them. The pattern may repeat, but you do not have to repeat it with the same blindness. Each integrated cycle gives you more sensitivity, more patience, more discernment, and more trust in what is happening beneath surface emotion. You begin to understand that repetition is not failure when consciousness has deepened. It is return at a higher level of honesty. When integration reaches this level, you may feel a strange kind of gratitude for phases you once resisted. You see how emergence warned you before life became loud. You see how growth gave shape to what could have remained only potential. You see how bloom showed you what was possible. You see how descent made that possibility honest. You see how integration let it become part of your being. The cycle begins to look less like a series of highs and lows and more like a living process of refinement. This does not mean you will never resist again. It means resistance becomes easier to recognize. It becomes less absolute. It becomes something you can listen to without obeying blindly. You can ask what it is protecting, what it is afraid of, what it has not yet understood. That question alone shows integration at work, because the old self often reacted before listening. The integrated self can pause long enough to learn. And in that pause, the next layer begins to reveal itself, not as a demand, not as a command, not as a pressure to become more impressive. It reveals itself as a quiet possibility that would have been impossible for the previous version of you to hold. Something in you has become steady enough to notice it without grabbing. Something has become open enough to feel it without rushing. Something has become honest enough to let it unfold at the pace of truth rather than the pace of fear. This is the living gift of integration. It does not close the spiral. It teaches you how to enter it again with more dignity, more awareness, and less need to turn every shift into proof. The lesson becomes embodied. The self becomes steadier, and the next movement begins to form beneath a quieter sky. Not because the cycle is finished forever, but because what you have carried through it is now strong enough to become the ground beneath whatever comes next.
If this transmission resonated, the spiral continues. You did not arrive here by chance, and you do not leave unchanged. More teachings are unfolding across the Vaharat library, each one meeting you where you are, not where you think you should be. Follow resonance. The next threshold is already listening.